Hello one and all, and welcome back to the RimWorld Eternal Winter series. I'm so glad to be back here today, my friends. I know it's been a little while, but don't worry, the Rat Daddy will never desert you. Nor shall I desert our fine, noble men and women here of the Eternal Flame. In today's episode, my friends, I plan on doing a lot of building as well as improvements around the keep. Sticking with that theme immediately, we're going to be starting by finding a place for all of these items that currently have nowhere for us to store them. If you watched the last episode, you'll probably know that the majority of these items were ripped from the cold dead hands of several impids, unfortunately. But of course that won't stop us from putting them on some brand new shelves that we plan on building in our warehouse storage room. As you can see, the storage room as it currently is becoming quite cramped, unfortunately. At some point we're going to have to try and expand it exponentially, especially if we plan on becoming a very large dynasty, which, as we've discussed several times, we definitely do. Speaking of which, the heir to our dynasty, Snowdrop, has now aged to the age of 10 years old. Because of this, we now have the option to give her a passion in a few different types as work, as well as choose a new trait for her. As for her work, I actually ended up giving her a minor passion in cooking and construction and a major passion into plants. And as for her trait, I also ended up giving her the trait of too smart, as it seemed like the best option. I must say that I am ever so proud of young Snowdrop, as she is truly beginning to blossom into a preteen. But it is also very, very sad because it feels like it was just yesterday that she was a baby. Moving on though, one night I decided that I would like to make some pretty major improvements to our slave quarters that actually don't currently exist. Previously we only had Moin Cow, and she had her own personal room, which is something I'd like to have for all of our slaves, present and future. I suppose the Jarl and the lady just kind of figured, since they really have absolutely no choice in what goes on here or the fact that they're even here, the very least we could do is give them an okay place to sleep at night. Once the new slave quarters were finally completed, I decided to take a good long while and just put our sole focus into trying to recruit the impid that we had imprisoned named Nometh. You see, Nometh here is actually a druid, and druids have some pretty interesting stat modifiers, such as a plus 25% to their plant work speed, plus 25% to plant harvest yield. They also have some other different abilities and things like that that I thought would be perfect for an apothecary position. So of course the impid here was going to be my first pick for that position, but unfortunately they ended up deciding to try and break out of their cell, which was a little bit of an issue. The closest person that we had was the young child Kaz, who busted through the slab door with her ice wand, immediately beginning to fire at the prisoner, and she actually ended up killing her. As you could imagine, this was not exactly what I intended to happen, or what I thought would happen, unfortunately. Looks like someone else is going to have to take that apothecary position. And Nometh here is going to have to take her place among her slain brethren from the end of last episode. Or, you know, a small little frozen spot here next to the hillside. Either one's fine. Even though she ended up killing a prisoner that we really wanted to join us here because of their abilities and whatnot, Kaz did truly prove herself today. Needless to say, all the members of the Eternal Flame, including her adoptive parents, Jarl and Lady, were extremely proud of her. Some time later, I would actually end up sending in the Jarl as well as one of his royal blood guard to actually begin harvesting some heal root from the apothecary building and begin planting some dyes. We're actually going to be using these dyes to dye the blood guard's armor so they truly look crimson as blood. Just as the name would suggest, of course. Thankfully, the dye plant was pretty quick growing for the most part. The only issue was we only had the 2 planter boxes, so it would take a few harvests before we had enough dye for both of our people. But of course, we are very patient, so that wasn't much of an issue. In the meantime, though, I would actually have Squiggle begin working on some brand new sets of knight armor for both of our blood guard members. Not only is knight's armor one of the better sets of armor from the more medieval armor and helms mod, but of course it is also a very fitting set of armor given the duties of the blood guard, I feel. Once the 2 sets of armor had finally been forged, we had Sissy and Robin begin putting them on, of course, and then once that was finally completed, we would actually send them both over to the styling station. That way we can finally begin dyeing their armors, their cloaks, and their helmets. Now, I do want to say, I do like the styling station. I like the ability to be able to dye armors and whatnot, but as you could probably see there, the armors and the cloaks and whatnot, they're not very dark. They're a very light shade of red and blue, so I did dye the armors and whatnot. I used the dye, I made the armors, I done everything, but in the end, I ended up using character editor to make them just a teeny tiny bit darker, unfortunately. So, in other words, yes, I did cheat just a little bit, but it was only a cosmetic cheat, right? I just wanted to make them look a little bit better, and I do think that they look a lot better, honestly. This looks more like a blood guard to me than the paler shades of red and blue that we were seeing in the styling station. Besides, I got everything ready to actually do it. I just ended up not liking how light of a color it was, so I made it darker, right? We still use the resources, of course. Of course, though, I do still understand if you want to brand me as a cheater. A little bit of time later, and I remembered that our new impid slave named Vasperon is actually magically gifted, meaning that we can promote her to a wanderer. Wanderers can actually learn any of these standalone abilities from any of the other magical classes, and once you promote them, they also get a few of their own abilities right away. But now, my friends, we finally get to the meat and potatoes of this episode. We're finally starting out on some of the larger building projects that I have planned for this episode. The main one here that we're beginning on is an expansion of our walls. Unfortunately, though, I wasn't paying attention. I don't know if I went to the kitchen or to the bathroom or what, but a roof ended up falling on Kaz. Thankfully, though, she didn't die, and she is recovering from the massive cut. As she begins recovering from the massive rat night oopsie daisy, we are going to continue working on our walls, though I actually want to do this massive expansion not only to expand our reach and control over the territory that it will be encompassing, but also as a massive symbol of our strength to the other dynasties and the savage tribes. Because our new walls are no doubt going to be the subject of many raid beatings, we are going to be making them out of granite. Unfortunately, though, I had depleted our stockpile pretty early on, so we had to begin some strip mining operations in the southwestern part of our territory. During this very lengthy construction project, we ended up having the opportunity to choose a new trait for Kaz, as she was now at the age of 13. We ended up choosing the Brawler trait for her, as I have no doubt she'll be an epic fighter. Not only will she be a good fighter, but she will also be a fairly tall fighter. As you can see, she's had quite the growth spurt since we last saw her a moment ago. Of course, it's pretty standard in RimWorld for children to be able to do some cleaning and some basic chores around the colony, but once they reach the age of 13, it's pretty wonderful because they actually can do the normal construction and mining and cooking and everything else that any other colonist that you have can do, so that's perfect for Kaz here, who can actually start chipping in more. And of course, during this entire time that I've been yapping, the construction of our new walls has still been underway, ongoing day and night, with everyone chipping in, of course. Not too long later, it was finally completed, and with our new walls being completed, we could finally take down our old ones. And of course, this time around, I would not forget to remove the roof ahead of time before deconstructing. The deconstruction process would end up taking about half a day or so, and then about the same amount of time to actually begin hauling all of those resources back inside. I actually plan on repurposing them throughout our new walls, as well as a brand new construction project that I've yet to mention. The very first building to be created within our new territory is actually going to be a grand arena that will be made out of limestone with massive granite columns in the center where the fighters will be fighting. The idea just came to me when I was thinking, you know, all great empires have an arena where people can go and watch others try to slaughter one another, and so should we, as we're going to be a great empire, and truly we already are becoming one. I didn't want this to just be a one-off thing, though. Anytime we felt like it, things like that, you know, I wanted to make this an annual spectacle, something like a holiday. So I actually ended up using the Days Matter mod to create a holiday for it called Tournament Day. Now, if you guys have any better ideas for what we should call this, be sure to let me know. Tournament Day is just kind of a placeholder. As you can see, the the new bit of land that we've actually annexed within our walls is very large and very bare at the moment. I do plan on filling it out with several different types of buildings and things like that, of course, but we're going to have to continue collecting more resources before I can do that, because building the walls themselves have really depleted what we had in storage, unfortunately. Even from up here in the sky, I can see the eager faces of our noble men and women just so excited to try out the new arena. Let's not keep them waiting any longer. We thought it may be best for morale and for our spectators, of course, if we allowed our two slaves to be the very first opponents here in the new arena. Moincow and Vosferon would both be given a dagger each, one of steel and one of elven creation, just to make things a little bit more interesting. The two would stare each other down for a moment before rushing to their weapons. After picking up their daggers, they would immediately begin encircling one another. They seem to be playing it quite cautious, if you ask me, only running in to swipe at each other with their daggers on occasion, mostly trying to keep their distance as much as possible. By this point, Moincow's clothing had already been shredded by the dagger, meaning she had very little protection. A quick swipe against her chest took her down. And with that, we have our champion. Vosferon is the victor of the very first annual tournament day, a title I'm sure she'll hold near and dear to her heart. Regardless of how riveting it seemed from a bird's eye view, unfortunately it would appear that the tournament was a bit lackluster, unfortunately. Oh well, we'll try again next year. In the meantime, we have some blood to clean up here. We'll need to make some improvements to the arena by next year's tournament to make it more beautiful and whatnot, and thus more entertaining for everyone as well. Even though building our brand new arena was very fun, as well as having our very first tournament in there, I do feel like we've gotten a bit sidetracked, and I'm going to try to get us back on track here by focusing on more building. Of course, to do so though, we are going to need to do a massive strip mining operation down here in the southwest corner of the territory on these hills, because we are very, very low on stone. The process for mining this entire mountain, as well as bringing back all of the stone chunks to be processed by Robin and the others who are cutting up all these stones into small stone slabs that we can actually use for building, takes days upon days to complete. But in the end, of course, it is very much well worth it, because our hard work pays off when we are able to create such beautiful and wonderful structures like our brand new grand dining hall, which I am actually building just underneath our throne room. The new dining hall here is going to be a massive improvement upon the current one that we have been using within the base, and the reason for that, well, there's actually several reasons for that. One, it is much larger. We're going to have a lot more room. As you can see, we're actually building much larger tables that can seat more people as our population continues to grow, of course. Another really great thing about this new dining room being so large and having so much more room than the previous one is the fact that we'll be able to add new production areas. There's a lot of different cooking research that I plan on doing in the very near future, such as meat preservation or cheese making, and with those new researches into different types of food production come new production areas that will need room to put down, of course. And last but not least, of course, with more room, that also means we have more room to put down things like artwork, just further increasing the stats and beauty and whatnot of the dining hall. Unfortunately, though, our little building montage was cut a bit short by an army of impids who had arrived in the area looking to try and raid us. Now, I can't even begin to think of a reason as to why these impids would come here looking to try and sack our wonderful little city that we're building, other than the fact that at the end of last episode, of course, we killed several of their friends and family and razed one of their settlements to the ground, but I mean, other than that, from a distance it didn't look like the impids were all that well equipped. All we could really see that they had were some pretty basic primitive weapons. And you know me, the old rat daddy, I like to jump in, shoot people, and then ask questions later, and that's exactly what I had planned on doing to these impids. I was actually going to go into one of our towers here with the embrasures and just start raining down bullets and arrows. And I indeed did come very close to trying that out, but I noticed many of the impids had some magical or warrior classes, and I thought maybe I should check those first. I'm very glad I did, because one of them is a succubus and they had the attraction ability. Basically, this attraction ability will make a small portal on the ground and it will continue sucking you into it, meaning that if we're inside this tower and that gets inside the tower, we're going to be stuck in the tower as all these impids come in and start blasting flames out of their mouth at us. Not ideal. Since the impids are standing around trying to to plan out their attack, we had plenty of time, so we would actually bring our cannons into a further out tower and hold fire up until the point that we had Moin Cow on our mortar. This way we could try to bombard them with some small mortar rounds as well as cannon fire. The cannons were more accurate close up, so I let the mortar go first. Unfortunately, we ended up missing them completely. This was enough to piss them off, though, pissed them off enough that they would actually come to try and attack us. Which was perfect because as they got closer, we could finally open up our cannons. Unfortunately, though, the cannons still were pretty inaccurate and we only managed to hit one impid with the shells. We wouldn't have enough time to try and reload the cannons for another shot, unfortunately, so we would actually begin retreating to the confines of our walls as we let our traps do their one and only job. We did, however, end up using Moin Cow's light burst ability, blinding several of the attackers, causing them to step on traps, incapacitating them, and or killing them. Those that got through our defenses and survived our traps, though, were met with an unrelenting force of bullets and arrows. That, on top of Moin Cow roasting one of them to death with her bare hands and her abilities, sent them all packing all the way back home to their little impid camp. The cowards have been defeated. Yet another victory for the Eternal Flame. The only thing left to do now is have Squiggle go around and find some of the remaining and crush their heads with her warhammer. Not a problem, though. We would also need to begin hauling in all of the items like their beautiful jade that will add to our treasury, as well as cleaning up their splattered bodies that were crushed by our massive stone traps. Once that was finally completed, we would get back on track with more building and improving. This time around, I'm actually going to build a special bedroom for Lim, as I feel like Lim here is basically our royal librarian, I suppose. I can't really think of a very good term for Lim here, but she's always doing the researching and whatnot in this little library, so I felt that it would be nice to give her her very own room right next to it within the home of the Jarl and the lady. This should also help her out quite a bit, as she doesn't really have to commute to go do research, or at least not very far anymore, and just as well, of course, this is kind of a gift for her dedication over the years. You know, Lim, I mean, she's been with us since the beginning, essentially, since the first few episodes into this series, so she honestly has really earned this not only in combat, but also with her wonderful research for the entire dynasty. Someone else who I felt would be very deserving of their very own bedroom within the Jarl and Lady's home was our Bloodguard, of course. Not only are they deserving of it, but it would be an extreme benefit to have them sleeping near the royal family. You never know when something may go bump in the night, like an assassination plot or another raid, or really anything could happen, and we want to ensure that they're always around to protect the royal blood. Right now it's more of a barracks, and I guess I do plan on keeping it that way, but we're going to have to begin making some major improvements to increase the beauty and whatnot of the barracks, because we don't want people very upset that they're all having to sleep in the same room. As for now, we only have Robin in here as well. But personally, I do think that Robin is enough because the royal family here isn't very far from her. She would only have to run through the treasury and directly into their bedrooms. At some point, I'm going to make some major renovations to this area. I like what we have here, but I'm not sure that I like the layout, especially since later on we're going to need to give more royal family members their very own bedrooms, of course. I do want to say as well, I've made the exception that Sissy would not have to sleep in the barracks for the Bloodguard because Sissy needs to sleep with Piub, and we wouldn't want to make Piub do that, so that's the reason why. We will make an exception. I also wanted to mention by this point we have several baby bison from our pack animals, which I also have still yet to name, of course. I'm still holding out and waiting on you guys to provide a lot of names. I'm going to look over all of them from this episode and any from last episode and try to choose from that list. And of course, because of our newfound baby pack animals, we would immediately begin planting a new field full of winter bloom plants because we're going to need more and more food for all of them, of course, as well as all of our people. And now finally, the long-awaited moment that you've all been wanting. I have finally installed a mod that does show hair underneath the hats, and I must say that I see why everybody wanted this. This is amazing. I especially like Zippy's hair coming out from underneath her crown. It looks really good. The mod that I've decided to begin using to do this is called Dub's Apparel Tweaks, and it has been, of course, added to the mod list. Just as well, this mod was actually suggested by our good friend Lost Mind, so thank you ever so much for that. I want to thank the rest of you as well well who have commented mods that can help us achieve this. I really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of you have suggested this same mod as well as a few others that do the same thing. I saw a lot of comments, so thank you all. And while still on the topic of new mods that I've decided to add, I have added yet another one called the Long Distance mod. This mod will actually allow us to add any family members, lovers, things like that, of our colonists that are actually part of other factions. This mod was suggested by a lot of you guys in the comments of last episode when I asked you if I should add some mod or use dev mode to try and get Rick, who is Genevieve's lover, to join us here, so thank you guys all for that. I would actually very quickly begin using this mod by creating an advanced scribing table and building a new bird post, because I actually deconstructed our other one when I deconstructed our walls, and I only just now realized, unfortunately. But the combination of the two of these together actually act as a comms console, so we'll be able to contact other factions. Now with this newfound form of communication, Genevieve would be able to sit down and write out a letter of correspondence, an offer letter to Rick of citizenship under our new dynasty. Quite surprisingly, Rick actually, without hesitation, renounced his allegiance to House Amboise and quickly decided to join us here at the Eternal Flame. Looks like the two star-struck lovers will be reunited once again. However, it's not as simple as Rick just showing up outside of our territory. Turns out it's actually going to take a little bit of time for him to arrive here. He's most likely traveling on foot as well, which is much more realistic, which I do like. I have no doubt in my mind that he would walk the longest miles, climb the highest hills, and travel down the deepest of valleys to be with Genevieve once more. Before Rick arrives though, I would like to have him and Genevieve their very own humble abode created. This is something that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. I did like our old base and whatnot, and it was a very humble beginning, of course, but I want everyone to have their own individual homes, and I think now we may be able to sustain the fuel for fires and whatnot to warm them all, so I'm going to go ahead and begin working on some. To begin, we're only going to be building two small cabin-like homes, one of course for Genevieve and Rick as we discussed a moment ago, but the separate one just across from them, their very own neighbor of course, is going to be Piab and Sissy in their very own small granite cabin with slate flooring that is just the most beautiful of tile to really increase their happiness. Now that we don't have to worry about people who are sleeping in our warehouse and their little bedrooms, we can finally begin tearing down some walls and putting in some new growing areas for fiber corn. I've been wanting to try my hand once more at growing some fiber corn inside, and I wasn't very pleased with our previous growing room and whatnot that we had set up, our indoor farm, so I've actually wanted to use some of these planter boxes like we were using in the apothecary building to grow fiber corn inside the warehouse. This way the new farm isn't near as ugly as the previous one, we get our wood from the fiber corn, and I don't have to feel guilty for any cheating heat sources like chandeliers because it's actually being heated by the steam geyser. Some time later, after we had finally finished our new fiber corn farm, we actually had Rick, who had finally arrived here at Mount Rosh to join the Eternal Flame and his lover. Reunited once again, and this time permanently of course, and it feels ever so good. I am truly glad that Genevieve has her lover along with her, and that we have yet another member to the Eternal Flame, of course. As you can see here with his skills, he is quite the shot. He's very good at planting and crafting. His traits, of course, are kind, so he's a very kind person, but he's also a tough wimp, which is a very strange matchup. But I suppose if he has to be a wimp, he should at the very least be a tough wimp. Like I mentioned, am very glad that we actually have him here. I feel a little cheaty being able to just call upon relatives and whatnot and have them join us here, but based on what I could tell with the mod, it seems like there is also a good chance that they will not accept the invitation. If you guys would like, I could try to add some other family members, such as Rosh's family members. To be honest, it might make sense now that Rosh has a large dynasty that is able to take down an entire settlement of Impids on its own. I feel that it would be pretty reasonable for him to reach out and ask his family if they would like to join him here in the kingdom that he's building, and just as well I think it would be pretty fair that they might consider that offer, as he really has something to offer now. But my good friends, as we wind down to the end of the episode here, I do have a little bit of lore for you from our good friend Rival Diarista 8128. I apologize if I butchered your name. Of course, I'm not very good with names, but I am going to attempt to narrate your telling of Kaz here. A harsh, unforgiving land of the never-ending winter, a small child had to survive. She is a descendant of the Impid tribe who's known to master the way of fire. Due to their nature, they're able to survive in the cold winter, but not for the young ones. For you see, while the adults have their fire burning within their bodies, the Impid children have not yet fully developed the fire that burns within them. As Kaz was running away from the adult Impid, she was unable to escape with her little legs. She is, however, able to hide in a nearby runic machine, which had a communication rune to a nearby settlement. She's begging to anyone to save her from the slavers, almost as if the gods themselves were listening to her pleas for help. While being dragged back to her cell, two mysterious figures which she had not known appear nearby the runic machine. They managed to track her down using some form of magic spell that was unknown to Kaz. While the slaver was busy searching for food in the nearby forest, the two mysterious figures would release Kaz from her cell, setting off yet another magic spell that would warn the slaver. A battle against the slaver was unavoidable, but the two figures do manage to defeat him. One of the figures says to Kaz that they're going to bring her to a safe place where she belongs. And there is also the recommendation here at the end that we should actually name Kaz Aza, or Aza, I suppose, which apparently may have a meaning in Indonesian of hope or victory, of course. So, you know what? I think I will do that. Now, I will add that in, I believe, as her nickname. That was a wonderful bit of lore, though, into Kaz's backstory, or Aza's backstory, as I should say now, of course, and a wonderful retelling of the events that led up right before we ended up saving her, of course. I do feel that that's probably enough lore for the end of this episode. You guys are always providing me with amazing amounts of lore and different tidbits and things like that, so I really appreciate it. I'll try to talk about some more at the end of the next episode, of course, but for now, my friends, I will see you next time. I love you ever so much. Goodbye.